The daunting aspect of this is to look at our societal dynamics and see the additional layer of delusion that's deeply ingrained in us, which obscures our ability to recognize the material changes in which that are changing around us. We're wired to consistently undermine any progress that anybody makes. And goes back to the Marx quote: the tradition of all dead generation weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. So we find a profound understanding of this phenomenon. This quote suggests that the legacies and norms of past generations heavily influence and often constrain our current thought processes and actions. And I mean, that's bang on, Carl. Over the past centuries, and more rapidly in more recent decades, we've been conditioned to alienate ourselves and doubt any of our abilities. This self alienation is paradoxically the driver for our improvement and significantly impacts our efforts for material change and revolutionary action. We exist within a framework of self doubt and self undermining, which prevents us from acknowledging and building upon any of the progress that we make because we're unable to see it. And this tendency manifests not just in the political arena, but also in societal movements that indirectly influence political movements. Even when we achieve victories, we often find ourselves undermining the achievements that are made. And instead of acknowledging the effort and progress, we fall into infighting and fail to provide any positive reinforcement for the work that we've done. And then, although this pattern occurs in relatively few instances, when it does, it starkly highlights the self imposed barriers to recognizing and building up our achievements. When we do actually get success, it's extremely hard for us to see it or appreciate it. And so, this cycle of self sabotage and underestimation of our own accomplishments is a vivid example of what binds us to state servitude. It reflects this deep seated challenge within our collective psyche where the shadows of our past generations and our ingrained habits of self doubt and alienation hinder our ability to fully realize and appreciate our potential for change and growth. Again, the Marx quote: people make their own history, but they do not make it under the conditions as they please. Do they not make it under self-selective circumstances, but under the circumstances existing, giving and transmitting from the past? And, there is such a crucial insight there. We're not creating history in a vacuum. We're doing so within the framework that was shaped by the past. And that includes how the framework that shaped the past shapes our brains. This is vital, right? This is vital in understanding our current social, political, institutional, and ideological dynamics, and not just that, but also our personal world. Because if you're able to see, you don't make your own history. You make your own history, but you make it not in the conditions of your choosing. You're able to realize the world that you live in is not the fault of others or your fault or anything, but is the fault of the material conditions in which you've all lived in. So even as we strive for change, our efforts are often colored by this legacy of servitude, bondage, and self-alienation that has ingrained in our collective psyche. This alienation is coupled with a subconscious drive for our own self-destruction, which means that any progress that we make is invariably tainted by our inability to fully escape these deep-seated patterns of being incapable of seeing it. We find ways to undermine our achievements, plagued by self-doubt and a failure to acknowledge the significance of our victories. This cycle of undermining and alienation affects all aspects of our social interactions, the outcomes of all of our collective actions as in politics and just as humanity is in general. The history of socialism is a perfect example of this, marked by a pattern of initial intention co-option, and then results in the divergence significantly from the original goal. It's almost as if our efforts are in a negotiation with a predetermined outcome, rooted in the very system we're trying to change.